Good evening. Coming up next in the news, Clean Up Australia. Thousands right around the country lend a hand to rid the nation of rubbish. Organisers say it's the most successful campaign ever. An engine failure causes a light plane to crash on the New South Wales south coast, injuring 6. The Liberal leadership and John Hewson forced to apologise to his main rival John Howard. And drama in a drain, the tale of woe for a Sydney horse and its owner. All the details up next.
Second Edition News, proudly brought to you by Realty World.
This is 10 Eyewitness News with Sandra Sully.
Our most successful yet, the Clean Up Australia Day. A close call as a skydiver's plane makes a hard landing. And another successful gay and lesbian Mardi Gras through Sydney. Good evening. An estimated 500,000 people of all ages took part in today's Clean Up Australia Day, tonight considered the most successful in the campaign's history. Among the record amounts of rubbish uncovered and collected, the usual car bodies and white goods. But this year, a live hand grenade and several marijuana crops as well.
Sydney's bushfires several weeks ago cleared away the undergrowth and uncovered rubbish, tons of it. Those areas received special clean-up attention.
Right, well done, well done.
Witnessing it all, Clean Up Australia's chairman and Australian of the Year, Ian Kiernan. What he found were illegal dumping sites hidden by years of undergrowth.
I feel disgust, absolute disgust. I mean, like so many other Australians, I've got great love for this country, and for people to be despoiling it, defiling it like this is just absolutely unacceptable.
A record number of volunteers, 500,000, collected a record amount of rubbish at 8,000 sites around the country.
It's outrageous. I just can't believe there's this much here. I knew it'd be bad, but I didn't think it'd be like this.
Among the weapons in the litter war, helicopters used to drag out what seemed to be countless car bodies scattered throughout the bush. This is where the Clean Up Australia campaign began early in 1989. But the message doesn't seem to have got through because, despite coming back to Sydney Harbour every year for 6 years, there's still new rubbish to clean up. Divers worked for hours collecting more than 40 bags of discarded bottles. It was a similar story around the country. In Adelaide, waterways were the focus, drawing large groups of people. In Melbourne, it was the Yarra River and several kilometres of adjoining waterways. Organisers say millions of pieces of litter are dumped into the river each year. For Ian Kiernan, the message now is that cleaning up is not enough.
What's got to be realised by the community is that they have got to play a watchdog role, because this is not acceptable behaviour, that we live in this beautiful country and there are commercial operators that are just defiling it.
The clean-up campaigner wants tougher action taken against irresponsible people who illegally dump what they no longer need. Eddie Meyer, 10 News.
6 people have survived a light plane crash at Nowra, south of Sydney. The Cessna 206 was taking skydivers aloft when its engine faltered. The pilot managed to coax the stricken craft back to the airfield, but it flipped over on touchdown.
The Cessna lost power on takeoff from HMAS Albatross Naval Air Station. It came down on grass, flipping over when the nose wheel snapped and the propeller dug in.
On your ankle? Yeah, everybody's still in there. Stay out, don't move. Your ankle, mate. Are you, Brian, all right?
All 6 on board were injured in the mishap. Pilot Ian Payne suffered cuts and bruising. 2 of the skydivers suffered suspected broken ankles and spinal injuries.
Lost power just after takeoff. He managed to turn it back onto approach, but she died again. We just made it over the trees, and then she went in.
And the engine was missing and chugging, and there was smoke trailing, and it was dropping down very low. And we watched it, and I'm not sure if the engine cut out, but it came down that low in the trees. We thought that it crashed in the trees.
A doctor landed his aircraft after witnessing the crash and gave first aid.
And the thing did a complete somersault, came to a stop, and within seconds I could see people getting out, exiting the aircraft on their own steam.
Those hurt were comforted by other members of the group until ambulance officers arrived.
No,
Mate, before you give him water, mate, make sure the doctor...
Yeah, the doctor said...
Okay, fair enough.
The Cessna belongs to the Royal Australian Regiment Parachute Club, although those on board were all civilians from nearby Wollongong. While a series of jumps had already been completed, the remainder of the program was cancelled. Air safety investigators will examine the aircraft. The Australian Parachute Federation has also launched an investigation. John Hill, 10 News.
Opposition leader John Hewson has been forced to apologise to his main rival John Howard to heal the latest row in the Liberal Party. With the coalition fighting 4 important by-elections, the two men have put aside their differences, but crucial policy issues remain unresolved.
The Hewson-Howard rivalry was supposed to have been dead and buried after the last election, but a full year later, it's still dominating Liberal politics.
John and I had quite a lengthy conversation, and he did indicate to me his regrets and his apologies for the impression created that he had been attacking me. He told me he wasn't.
This latest kiss and make-up comes after Dr Hewson attacked Mr Howard's views on Asian immigration and his tax policies for families. And so, once again, as the Liberals try for a unified front to contest 4 federal by-elections, the main protagonists are back on TV, urging each other to stop fighting.
I think what's going on is that the Liberal Party should realise that its best assets lie in focusing on our opponents and not on each other.
Well, I think we need to get behind the leader and put these leadership disputes well and truly behind us. There's no doubt that any contention over leadership is going to be immensely damaging to the coalition.
Fueling all of this tension is the policy crisis confronting the party. Should the Liberals be moderate or conservative? The leaders are now saying both philosophies will have to be embraced.
It's the only way you'll manage the Liberal Party. If you try and achieve victory for one side or the other, you will have perpetual strife.
Up until this point, the parliamentary uproar over the sports rorts affair had given the opposition a small but significant boost in today's opinion polls. They lead the government by 6.5%, but risk losing that margin if the internal bickering continues. Paul Smith, 10 News.
Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett has strongly hinted the coalition government will use its strength in Parliament to thwart a court challenge by the Labor Party. But opposition leader John Brumby says any such move would cause a constitutional crisis in the state.
Last week, the ALP lodged a Supreme Court writ claiming Mr Kennett had breached the Constitution by allegedly profiting from an Urban Land Authority contract worth $180,000, won by his family's now defunct advertising agency, KNF. Opposition leader Brumby has accused the Premier of abusing parliamentary process.
The Premier is prepared, it seems, to abuse the Parliament, to use his numbers, Jeff's jury, to get a plea of innocent, to get a plea of not guilty. Now, we're saying that would be a misuse of the Parliament, an abuse of the Parliament, and we will take further advice on that matter.
Brumby's very new on the scene. He lost his seat federally, and unfortunately he's one of a line of succession of ALP leaders in this state who haven't been able to focus on both the issues concerning the people of this state. Ultimately, he has no understanding, obviously, of the Constitution.
Despite today's reports that the Libs will challenge the KNF claims in Parliament, Mr Kennett says no decision has yet been made.
The case may not be heard until the next election, if we fight it through the courts. And in that case, the moment the election is called, the whole case drops away anyway.
If the Liberal Party decides to debate the alleged breach in Parliament and is successful in having the Premier forgiven, the opposition will be prevented from taking the matter back to Parliament or pursuing it through the courts.
One law for all Victorians, no special laws for Premier Kennett.
Peter Morris, 10 News.
Still to come, another scandal threatening American President Bill Clinton. And have police found Britain's worst serial killer? A grisly discovery for British police investigating what could be one of the country's worst serial killings. They've uncovered another 3 bodies at the house in Gloucester, where they found 3 bodies buried in the backyard last week. The man who owns the house has been charged with murdering 3 women, including his daughter, but police think the final toll could be as high as 12.
The painstaking search of 25 Cromwell Street took on a new urgency tonight, As the excavations went on, the police revealed that they found what they believe are the remains of 2 more people.
This afternoon, police officers still performing the excavations in Cromwell Street found in 2 separate areas what is considered to be 2 significant and separate finds.
Throughout the day, the street reverberated with the sound of pneumatic drills as police smashed their way through the concrete flooring. Electronic equipment has been brought in to scan underground. 2 families in Gloucestershire have been informed of today's findings, although formal identification is likely to take some time. 3 bodies have already been found in the garden, and the police believe the death toll may rise further still.
I have reason to believe that there may be other remains in the area, but I am not in this position at this time to explain that further. We will continue to excavate. We have found no more remains or any indications at this time.
The owner of the house, Frederick West, has already been charged with the murder of 3 women, including his daughter and a former lodger. The search of the garden has been completed. Now every inch of the house will be examined. And tonight, police said they may start digging at other addresses in the county.
Yes, just updating that 6th body found just a short time ago. A man armed with a handgun and what he claimed was a bomb has been shot dead by one of the people he was holding hostage. Police in Salt Lake City say the man seized 18 hostages during a ceremony for visiting Tibetan monks in the town library. But one of his hostages was a police officer who'd been teaching in another room of the building. When negotiations failed, the hostage police officer tackled the gunman and shot him 4 times. He died later in hospital. None of the hostages were injured. Well, it may not be Watergate, but the name is similar, and it's a scandal that's getting worse for President Bill Clinton. It's the Whitewater affair, an investigation into a failed loan company that today claimed another of Mr. Clinton's White House advisors.
As a result of their own bungling, the White House staff have now brought the Whitewater affair crashing about their ears. President Clinton left for Camp David as 6 key staff members were being compelled to testify on secret briefings they received from Treasury Department officials on the status of one of many investigations that form part of the widening financial scandal. The White House lawyer, Bernard Nussbaum, who mistakenly permitted the secret briefings to take place, has been forced to resign.
We have to be careful. I think I have sent a very clear and unambiguous signal that there's no point in letting a process mess this White House up when we have not yet been accused of any wrongdoing.
Whitewater began as an investigation into land deals in Arkansas while Bill Clinton was the state's governor. But now the special prosecutor is demanding a new pathologist's report on the shooting death of Mr. Nussbaum's former deputy, Vincent Foster, the Clinton aide who was working on the Whitewater affair when he apparently committed suicide. And the Rose law firm, where Mr. Foster and Hillary Clinton were once close colleagues, has been accused of shredding documents relevant to the investigation.
Bosnian Serb forces have again tested the patience of the United Nations, blocking 7 aid convoys. The Serbs stopped the trucks despite a threat by the UN commander in Bosnia to use military force to get them through. But in the southern city of Mostar, some relief for dozens of wounded civilians desperately in need of medical help.
The civilian casualties were the first to be evacuated from Mostar in weeks. More than 50,000 people, mainly Muslims, have been besieged in a small enclave in the eastern side of the city for 11 months. The shelling from Croatian positions has been ferocious. A week-old ceasefire and a proposed federation between Croats and Bosnian Muslims gave Spanish United Nations troops the opportunity to organize the evacuation. Many of the wounded have lost limbs. Some had head wounds. All could not have been given proper treatment in Mostar. The casualties are benefiting from a ceasefire that's changing central Bosnia. Under its conditions, new United Nations checkpoints are being established, with Croat and Bosnian policemen working together. It's a historic moment, and it's happening fast. Just hours ago, these men would have been operating checkpoints on their own side of the lines. They're the kind of barriers that have separated communities and strangled aid. To help keep up the momentum towards peace, British United Nations troops have set up a new base. It's another demand on a command already stretched. The base is in Captial, where local Croats have been fighting alongside Bosnian Serbs against Muslims. It's difficult to imagine a more sensitive assignment, and the Light Dragoons are preparing for the worst. 6 mortar rounds, almost certainly from Serb positions, have been fired at the camp.
In the Peruvian capital, Lima, rescue teams backed by the military are still searching for victims of a massive flash flood. More than 15,000 families living in villages on the outskirts of the city were rescued after the Rimac River suddenly burst its banks. Police and civil defence helicopters ferried stranded and injured people to safety, but it's not known how many have perished. Heavy rains caused a sudden massive surge in the river, which sent rocks, logs and water gushing out of a valley into the suburbs. Still ahead, the world's biggest street parade, Sydney's Mardi Gras, over for another year. And criticism for the world's most famous dog sled race.